folks, this is Mark Maritato, military historical artist. Thank you for joining me for another video, the second installment of the Colonel Haldeman S. Putnam painting. If you would like to learn more about what inspired this painting, I will leave a link to the previous video which explains the historical background of what I am depicting in this scene. And please folks, if you like this video, consider giving it a like, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and also ask me any questions in the comments section. I will be happy to answer them for you. This will all help me to bring more of this type of content to you and is deeply appreciated. So today is the day that I start working on this painting in actual oil paints. What I'm doing here is establishing an overall dark tone of color with the paints that I'm using in order to establish a foundation where I will come back and paint lighter tones on top of it. In this stage, I'm not concerned with any detail. All I'm trying to do is lay more color down to establish an overall feeling. You will see as it develops, the painting will get darker and then have some areas of lighter, areas where the smoke will be. But overall, there's not a lot of detail being painted at this stage yet. I'm just trying to get an overall feeling of where my lights are going to be, where my darks are going to be, and then start painting in details later. Over the years, I've learned to paint with a very limited palette. Here's a photo of the palette I am using. Normally, I don't use more than one or two blues. I usually use ultramarine and cobalt blue, but for this piece, I'm also adding another color called Delft blue, which is a very nice blue that I could use for a nighttime scene, and I think will add a really nice effect to the painting once it's finished. The dark black color that you see me using here is actually a mix of two different colors, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, which makes a really nice rich black and is actually a better black to use than any black that you would get out of a tube. So that's why I don't use an actual black out of a tube. I like to mix my own blacks for any painting that I do. So you'll notice at this stage I'm using a rather large brush. That coincides with what I said earlier about just getting the overall color tone into this painting. Again, I'm not concerned with detail at this point. I'm only concerned with getting the overall feeling of the scene nailed down so that later on I could go back in and start working details out of the darker areas in the scene and the lighter areas as well. I'm just trying to establish an overall tone of value for everything. I guess the best way to describe what's going on here is when you take a camera and point it at a scene that you want to take a picture of, you have to point the camera in the direction of that scene, get it focused, and then take the picture of your scene. Well, with a painting like this, I like to start with the colors being laid in so that it looks out of focus, but slowly over time, the painting and the scene come more and more into focus as I add detail, as I add layers of paint. As time goes on, the scene will come more and more into focus, and you will see that as this progresses. So you'll notice as I go along, I'm very, very lightly adding layers of color over the acrylic layer that I had worked on previously so that I don't lose my underdrawing. What I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to lay in color for the overall effect and then build in the details later on. I'm not concerned with any details right now, as I said before. It's just getting color in and getting the overall feeling of the scene. You'll notice that with the red stripes on the American flag that I'm working on here, I started with a tone of burnt sienna. Now, red at nighttime actually turns black. You actually cannot see red at nighttime when there's no sunlight or daylight around. And that's also true with green as well. But for the sake of the painting, I am going to show some red just to delineate this as the American flag for the viewer. There is going to have to be some degree of artistic license that I use with the colors in a nighttime scene so that the viewer can recognize what is going on. I can't paint everything as black because then the painting won't be interesting. So some of the colors that I do use, you probably will not be able to see if you were in this scene standing here at nighttime. But for the sake of the overall picture that I'm trying to achieve, I am going to have to rely on some colors to be shown in a way that you wouldn't normally see in real life if you were standing in this scene. Further to this point, what's also going to help to illuminate this scene are the oranges and yellows you're going to see from the muzzle flashes and explosions that were going on during this battle. I'm going to mainly use this as my main point of illumination for the scene. So you're going to see orange flashes of light with bluish tones of color for shadows, which will play off each other and give the painting an overall additional point of interest, being that orange and blue are complementary colors. Alright folks, I'm going to let the video play with limited comments from here. Again, if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to ask. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you. you'll see that the underpainting that I did in blue is helping to establish the overall color feeling of this piece as it goes along. And it'll continue to do that as I go along more and more. In fact, when the painting is finished, when you look at the original piece, the blue undertone will show through in certain spots and help with the overall effect of the nighttime feeling I'm trying to achieve. So what I'm doing here is I'm bringing down what's called a maul stick, which is basically a dowel that I have attached to my easel. And I bring this down to help rest my hand against it, so I'm not resting my hand against the actual canvas. And this helps me to start painting in smaller details. Back on the left-hand side of the canvas is where the Confederate battle line will be. Again, I'm not really too concerned with a lot of small details. I'm just adding in smaller shapes and forms so I could start delineating the individual soldiers in this battle line. I'm starting with items or objects that are furthest back and then working my way forward. The reason why you want to paint everything in the background first is because it's in the background. If you try painting something that's a foreground element first, then you have to paint the background around it, which starts getting a little bit dicey with edges and things like that. So it really is much more helpful to paint the items or elements that are in the background first and then work your way forward. You'll notice that as you work your way forward, you're also working lower in the picture plane of the painting, because anything that's in the foreground will appear lower in the scene, because that gives the illusion to the viewer that the item that is lower placed in the scene is closer to the viewer rather than further back. It's a trick of perspective. right, folks, here is the painting in its current form. We will continue this in the next video. Please join me for that. Really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much.